Alright, so, before we really begin, I want to toss a couple things at you. Third and I are still really hammering out exactly how we want to do the format of this, but for now, this is pretty much going to be the method, the presentation of it. I'm going to go ahead and sit here and talk to you like I'm doing right now, and I'm going to tell you the before aspect, from memory, from preconception, with or without nostalgia. Basically, if you came to me and said, do an assessment on this game right now from nothing but memory, that's basically what you're going to get. Nice, brief, short snippet. Then we're going to go ahead and cut to third. He's going to show his thing. It's going to be a few minutes long, probably much shorter than my little section is going to be. And he's going to do that in his own style, giving the now perspective from someone who has never actually played the game before. And then we'll go to my sequence last, which of course will be the longest because it's me and I talk too much as I'm actually playing through the game. And of course my end results at the very end of how exactly my opinion has changed, if it's changed at all, after having played the game, 10 seconds prior. Because, I'll be recording that literally as soon as I finish playing the game. So without further ado, first game on the list is, of course, it's been advertised 7 trillion times, Super Mario Bros. 3. Now, if you asked me to do an assessment on this game right now, just off of memory, I'd say it's an amazing game and you should go buy it and play it right now. That's kind of literally true. I have so many good memories about this game. I have so many pleasant memories. This is one of the first games I ever purchased with my own money. Not all of it, because, $60 was hard to come by. But I actually did put forth work and effort into actually purchasing this game because I wanted it so badly, because I was trying to, pay for my own way, that kind of a thing. And I played it so much. I played challenge modes in it. I played speedruns in it. I did all sorts of things. I played this game ad infinitum. I'll never forget the time I was actually at one of the, at school, actually, and one of the teachers was playing Super Mario Bros. 3 and couldn't figure out a level, and I was like, well, have you tried this? And he was like, no, that'll never work. That was, of course, the method. But in all honesty, while Super Mario Bros. 3 is somewhat lacking in the story department, basically only really doing the bare beginning establishment of, setting, and that's kind of it, actually. Very little characterization, very little plot. The gameplay is phenomenal. I love the stages, I love everything, so yeah, nothing but praise, basically. Now, in case you were curious, by the way, one last little note here. Whenever I record these sections I'm doing right now, the before, I do these literally before. No editing cheats here. I'm literally recording this before I actually replay the game. So the idea here is I don't want to taint my own opinion by the thing, even though I could, recite from a script or whatever. I want to tell you how I actually feel about it prior to actually playing it. So with that said, let's go to third and see what he thinks.
Let me tell you about this little game called Super Mario Bros. 3. See, you're probably already humming some tune from the game in your head because you've played this game already. You probably opened the cartridge, played it growing up, and now keep it next to your unopened box of Mario cereal in your secret closet shrine to the mustached plumber. But me, I never really laid a finger on this game until pretty recently. I've heard it's a good game, great game, one of the best ever made, but is all that just nostalgia from people who weren't 3 when this game came out? Let's play it and find out. Ooh, everything's all bouncy, and even those little hills seem to be into the music. And this game's got a neat little graphical style. Despite being a NES game, this doesn't really feel like some out-of-place artifact. Sure, there are some obvious limitations because of the time, but they really do a good job with what they've got. It's colorful, stylized, and they really made it fun to look at. I've gotta say, this game has a couple of tracks that I really liked. I got to hear a lot of those tracks too, since unfortunately a lot of the levels do share the same music. But the only ones I really got tired of was the fortress and airship music. Those reminded me a lot of the stuff I used to pound out on a synthesizer when I was little, and that's not good. Those drums really didn't do them any favors either. So, apparently the story here, from what I've gathered, is that I've got to go and save a bunch of kings who get turned into furries. There's some magical wands or something that some colorful Koopa kids got a hold of, and they use their massive airships and magical powers to just prank the local monarch. I don't get it, but I wasn't really expecting War and Peace out of this game anyway. You go through it, use items, you jump on dudes, and you save the princess in the end. That's simple enough for me. Ghost? Thanks, princess. The whole map and item thing they have going on here is a really nice touch too. Although there are a few items that I never found out what their intended purpose was, it was very nice to be able to store power-ups and use them when you really needed them. Although, I still never really figured out why they make you run across the whole map to fight the airship if you fail. This game actually lets you skip levels if you want to. You don't need to finish all of the levels to beat the game. It has multiple ways you can go to complete a world, something that a lot of games nowadays don't do. While a lot of games today emphasize the 100% completion, this game's like, nah, if you don't want to go that way, you don't have to. This is a very visual example of a good convex flow structure, and is something a lot of games today don't even get right. You start with a few choices that in turn lead to more, which eventually come back down to a single choice that the player must make. This is represented in the game as going throughout the worlds, choosing the paths you want to take through them, and then finally culminating in the end with beating Bowser. I consider it a good thing that the game gets this flow structure right. It's basic and it's simple, but it works. Now don't get me wrong, you can make good games without sticking strictly to structures like this, but then they're far less like actual games and more like interactive movies when you do that. This game has more examples of good flow structure, like providing multiple ways to go through levels or defeat enemies. When you're playing a good game, you'll find a lot of these types of structures, since constantly presenting choices makes the player want to keep playing your game. This is something I'll probably be coming back to in upcoming games, but needless to say, Super Mario Bros. 3 gets this part right. Let's see. To defeat these boomerang guys, I can just use my Fire Flower power-up and shoot those at them. I can try to take a risk and jump on them. I could try to use my raccoon tail to whap him in the face. I got choices. As I got through the game, I had more of these choices to make with harder enemies to boot. That's another thing that tends to happen when you've got a good game structure. The amount of choices you're presented with tend to scale with the difficulty. There were some interesting little mini-games like slots, card matching, and chess that gave you power-ups all throughout the game. They did give a nice little break from the platforming, although I probably wouldn't miss them if they went away. Here's a biggie for me, controls. You see, I wasn't a super huge fan of the way it controlled. This game has something called inertia. I don't like inertia in platformers. I don't really like it in any games. When I stop moving, I want to stop moving. I don't want to slide around, even if it lets me duck and scooch under blocks when I'm NBA Mario. It makes the controls feel slippery and, well, just a little bit out of my control. Some people might like it and be used to it, but I'd get rid of it any day. I really don't care for inertia. Now that I've bashed that, let me praise the level design of this game just a little bit. Okay, maybe a lot. This game has better level design than most games I've played in the past few years. When I first heard that this game has 8 worlds, I was thinking that it was going to be the same types of levels over and over and over again. Wrong. Not only does each world have its own unique theme, they come up with increasingly creative ways to use the building blocks that they've been given. There were some levels I played where it was pretty obvious that the designer was just having fun, and they did some really wacky and interesting stuff with the levels. I was always pretty excited to start playing a level and see what neat, new little gimmick they were going to pull out. However, I will say that there were instances where they did disappoint. There were several places where they fell back on the gotcha trap. That's where you do something like place a monster just outside the screen over a pit that jumps at you when you go over said pit. So unless you had some sort of future sight, you were probably going to hit that monster and die the first time you went through. That sucks, and I hate that. Luckily, this game didn't have many of those, but they did pop up every now and then. Unless you're designing a game based on memorizing the level, please don't do that. It doesn't make me feel like I made a mistake, it just frustrates me because I have no way of reacting to it unless I just inch my character along the screen. And you know that's not how you're supposed to play it. Another issue I had, strangely enough, was with water. Water levels were a pain to move through unless you had that stupid frog suit. Water in general was awful because whenever I fell into water, I either spent the whole time trying to see where my character was because the water covers him up completely, or trying in vain to jump back out onto a platform, but failing because the controls suddenly decided to get drunk. All in all, the complaints I have are very minor and don't do a whole lot to detract from the overall experience of the game. I really had to dig to find specific things I wasn't satisfied with. What I think we have here is a very solid game that provides a very fun experience. Is it perfect? No, I don't think it is, but that's a label I can't really apply to any game I know of. Did I have fun with it? Yes I did. Would I play it again or games like it? Yeah, I probably would. Although I personally wouldn't place it as one of my top games, it ranks up there as simply a very solid game. Nothing really groundbreaking, but I suppose if it was, we've probably been doing things horribly wrong in a year since its release. Having completed this game and finding it of great quality, I give it 2 stamps. First, the stamp of quality, meaning I personally hold it as a game of higher than average quality. Secondly, the stamp of Save the Princess, which means I played it all the way to the end without giving up. Also, I wouldn't dream of robbing a Mario game of all things of that stamp. It does not earn any of the more negative stamps since it did not frustrate me greatly at any point in time or require me to look up instructions in order to progress. Super Mario Bros. 3 has visuals that still look good, music and sounds that are still appealing, and design that holds up better than many modern games. It is very easy for me to see why this game is held in such high regards decades after its release.
Well, with that being said, why don't we go ahead and see what I think about it. How do you transition to yourself? And now we go to Archie and Gaia. Hi, Archie and Gaia. I'm happy to be here. Whatever. Let's go ahead and skip to the gameplay, shall we? So, one of the first things that comes to mind with this game is the presentation of it. There's a very strange aesthetic to it that makes it look like it's constructed. A lot of people have talked about this and about theory crafting about how this is secretly an actual play or something like that, instead of just, an adventure. And like, I've actually seen one where, it's postulating that Mario Bros. 3 is actually Mario recreating his adventures from Mario 1, because he only ever had the one adventure, right? Not sure I believe that, but, it does, it is my personal opinion and belief, especially based on the way that the game presented, that it was done purely for the sake of the aesthetics of the situation, trying to make the game have a unique flavor and feel to it, other than Mario Bros. 1. Other than Mario Bros. 1, I deserve that. Which was, basically trying to be more serious, for lack of a better term. Mario Bros. 3 was trying for its own thing. This is something that the Mario franchise would continue to do for many years henceforth. Most notably in Yoshi's Island comes to mind immediately. Trying for its own little specific feel. That kind of a thing, right? One other thing I feel like talking about pretty much right off the bat here is Mario Bros. 3 really did something a lot of NES games and SNES games did a lot of, and that is the illusion of exploration, the illusion of freedom. I don't actually mean that in a bad way, though, and I mean that sincerely. What we have here is a situation where, you're playing a linear game, there's really no getting around that. And as you're playing this linear game, you are presented with things that either look like choices, or are kind of choices, or are sort of choices. It's this whole thing. It's kind of hard to explain properly, but, just to give it one way to explain it, right back in the very first stage, one of the first things that happens is you have the choice of going up or down. You saw me in my death playthrough. I went up. Now, and similarly, this is the part I really want to mention here. Look at this. There's these two stages. I'm just going to pause for a second. You see these two stages? There's 3 and there's 4 right there. And then you could go this way. Now you can see the whole map here. You can see that there's you don't have to do stage 3 or stage 4 in order to advance. But it's optional. And the fact that it's optional and there's no real reward for it other than that mushroom house over there gives you that feeling of the fact that you actually are exploring a world. While this is not quite to the same extent of what other games would try, like say the Final Fantasies, the Dragon Quest and whatnot, this is still the same concept being expressed in a different method. The idea of giving the player the feeling that they can actually do stuff other than, just going in a straight line. Kind of ironic, actually, given how much later games would champion the idea of there it is, of basically just flat out being linear and not trying to hide it, instead just trying to make it look as pretty and interesting as possible. Don't mistake that for bashing, don't mistake that for nostalgia, it's just a different approach. And I just find it interesting that so many of the older games, rather than trying for graphical quality or audio quality or whatever, which makes sense given the times, they would instead try with these illusions of freedom. And again, let's be honest with ourselves, these are in fact illusions. There's an idea that I usually call, well, okay, I call it percenting. Some of you have heard me talk about the difference between 90% and 100%, for example, and that is a pretty big difference, all things considered. Anybody who doesn't know what I'm talking about, I'm not going to explain it in full because that's not really in the purview of this video, but the idea here is, what will I be doing for all these playthroughs? Now, of course, the idea is every game on the list of the Veta now, every single one of them, down to a number, is one that I have played before. That's actually one of the critical points, actually, if I could be so bold, of this franchise. And that's one of the reasons why there's some games in this series that are not great, because it's a game I played before. Make sense? So, to wrap my point up, in any given playthrough, I'm going to be making a concerted effort to actually be effectively 90%ing. For those of you not familiar with the exact terminology, 90% basically means I am pushing to go ahead and do all the content, as I like to define it. Oh, I'm sorry, I want to talk about this real quick. So I was such a loser when I was a kid that I actually had charts that explained where all these things were, and you could pick, it was this card, and based on those two cards, you could tell exactly which of these things were, because there's only like 8 possible patterns for this to be. Now obviously I don't have those charts, I'm just picking randomly. But based on that you could get pretty much every single thing every time through. Now, you may be like, wait a minute, I remember those charts. Yes, you do, because you remember back when strategy guides were awesome. I'm sorry, I don't mean to sound cruel. There are actually plenty of strategy guides in the modern era that are actually still quite awesome. But when I think of strategy guides that are awesome, pretty much the first one on the top of that list is the Mario Bros. 3 one that Nintendo Power came out with. It had tons of graphics, it had a list of every enemy in the entire game, just for fun, and all their names, and a little snippet about them. It had actual maps of every stage, sometimes drawn out, sometimes kind of a combination of drawn-out screenshots. It was pretty much everything that I would want out of a strategy guide. It was amazing, and I loved it. Let's talk about one other thing really quick here, these power-up things. This is a system that was also pretty new to the era. The idea was you have a certain level of... Whoops, didn't mean to pause. You have a certain number of power-ups which you can use right off the bat on the world screen only. You can't use those in a stage. And obviously there's a ton of power-ups in a stage, and you save your power-up status between stages. That's not new, the saving power-up status. But what was new is the ability to switch it out outside of the stage. It lended a very small yet nevertheless significant amount of strategy to playing through the game, of hoarding. Well, let's be honest, most of us probably learned hoarding from this game. Before the RPGs really took over. But yeah, of hoarding your power-ups, of using them on the levels that you knew you would use them on, because you knew that one coming up is that frickin' one level. You need to have that frog suit for that. Or maybe there's this level, which you know is an airship level, or maybe there's this level where you've got those guys and you really have to shoot the cannonballs from their mouths. And you really want to make sure that you have your leaf for that, you know, blah 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 blah. The point is, that actually goes back to that freedom of illusion, or illusion of freedom, excuse me, thing that I talked about earlier. Here's an interesting question. I suppose I'll answer this for myself over the course of the game, but do you think the freedom of illusion concept in game design is a good thing? The idea of actually, you know, making the player feel, through flavor or through presentation, that there is more freedom, more exploration, more that you can do within a specific game than there actually is. Now, I would say yes, just automatically, but again, we'll find out as we go through this, and Lord knows there's other games that are going to have the same effect later on. It's actually funny, I feel myself sitting here trying really hard not to talk about stuff, because I don't just want this video to be a bajillion miles long, I mean minutes long, and me just basically cutting out the brief pauses in between me talking. I feel like I'm doing a lore run for all intents and purposes, which, in all honesty, I actually kind of am. For those of you who've seen my lore runs on stream, that is effectively what I am doing right now. One of the interesting things about video games in general is that there's a lot of stages, creatures, things that become memes. You wouldn't think on first glance would become memes. Especially given how little of a presence they actually have in whatever their game of origination is. And I'm betting, based on the fact that you're watching this video, and I screwed up that jump, that you already know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm of course referring to the Angry Sun, which is right up there and is about to start attacking me. Now the reason the Angry Sun is actually so difficult for so many younger players, myself included, is because, as you'll notice, he is on our layer. You know, I mentioned earlier the analogy of the piece of paper that's constantly moving to the right. He is not moving to the right. Just like we aren't moving to the right. The paper is moving to the left, and he is on the same layer as we are. So he is always going to be in some manner capable of intersecting you, which is something you have to deal with. So, I mentioned earlier the idea of exploration and stages, and even though it's present in the very first stage, this is a good example of it. This is just Nintendo Game Design 101, level design, I should say. There's a block up there. You can see it right there. It even has an animation, which makes it easier to spot. Specifically, so it's easier to spot. And you know, because you've played this far into the game, that the only real way to get up there is this. You get up here, and lo and behold, there's tons of coins. You know, there you go. There's your reward for having gotten up here. It's a completely alternate path to going through the stage. It was completely optional. I didn't really get anything out of it. I mean, yeah, coins, but whoopty crap, that's just lives. But it was a choice. It actually gave me a degree of freedom. How many players out there usually think of power-ups as just health bars in some of these games? So, okay, I want to demonstrate what I was just talking about right here. You see how those are discolored? They're kind of white. See that right there? That is actually indicative of, you know, the fact... Okay, it's actually kind of hard to explain, but basically, what happened here is I didn't actually destroy the block. The block was changed into a new thing, but that block is on a different palette, so that block is being represented different in the background, right? Now, you might think, oh, well, Arsh, you just gave away. You know, obviously they were doing it because of the limitation of the NES. Well, as you're probably already guessing, though, if you're using your brain, the answer is both. Here's another good example right there. That block can be changed, and like that. The answer is both. They did have a limitation with what they could do with invisible blocks and with the palettes they were limited with. So, and I do actually mean palettes this time. So they just made do with it and said, you know what, screw it. Integrate it into game design. It's actually a comment my friend Pax and I were talking about recently. The idea that many game developers, especially some of the truly great ones, actually did better work when they were more limited. So I have a confession to make. I've talked about this before and I'll talk about it again. I love ships. I just do. Ships have always been an automatic thing for me. Spaceships, airships, shipships, doesn't matter. I love ships, always have. And the airships of this game always just had this sort of appeal to me that they basically shouldn't have. Like, I don't know how to describe it other than that. There's nothing special, really. In fact, I've actually sketched these things out. In full, yeah, I was that kind of a kid. Without shame. Ah, didn't make it. Oh, shoot. Hurry. Hurry. I'm dead. Nope, I made it. I made it. Oh, my God. Anyway, so I used to sketch these things out. And I was looking, I was like, this is, like, completely infeasible. There is no way that this would actually be able to work as a ship. This just would not function. And so then, as you might imagine, knowing that it's our ship guy, my first task was immediately to redesign these ships to make it so that they actually fit and that they actually worked. Yeah, I was that kind of a kid. We just went over this. What do you want from me? Oh, shoot. Speaking of which, here's another thing to talk about. Obviously, I actually have a lot of fond memories of this game in general. One of the things is a concept that I don't actually have a good way of explaining, but it's basically the idea of the Goonie Squad. Or the Goon Squad, excuse me. Not the Goonie Squad, totally different thing. The idea here is that you've got your big bad, you've got your hero, but in between the two, you've got other villains who are all, like, thematic, is probably the best way to put them. Usually it's actually a band of 4 in virtually every video game ever. Oh god, it's World 3. In virtually every video game ever, whoever the, you know, the thematic villains are, or they don't have to necessarily be villains, sometimes they're just neutral characters. But whoever they are, there's usually 4 of them. And in fact, there's usually 3 males and 1 female. It's a fairly standard formula. You can see this all over the place, in all honesty. And it's actually easy to see why the very concept is appealing. Because the idea is that you're getting across a degree of subtlety and layers to it. And you can, as a writer, you have some freedom with doing more with these characters than you do with the main character. Now, obviously not every game actually does that, and indeed Mario 3 does not do that. Sort of. Because there is a little bit of flavor in the Koopalings, and yes, that's who I've been talking about this whole time. That is presented actually in the manual, believe it or not. If you've ever read the manual, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. If you haven't, they actually have little tidbits of dialogue, and it's just literally like a tiny little line, but they're specifically written, or at least the English version is translated in a specific way, in order to give them just a tiny bit of personality. And so some of the characters come across as more intelligent, or more perceptive, or more deceptive, or more stuck in the water, or, you know, whatever. What we have right there is a villain in Mario terms. This is another example of Mario 3 trying to push the boundaries a bit. And something I'm actually going to talk about for just a moment here. Oh god! Oh god! Ahem. So a lot of games do the deliberate psyching you out thing. And this is another way that they do it. Hey Bertha, you're dead. So now I can just go and be free, and I never have to worry about Bertha again. Well, of course, anybody who's played Mario Bros. 1 can already see the problem with that, because we all hated Lakitu for the exact same reason. No! So, one of the biggest complaints, to continue my thought from earlier, that people have about more modern Mario games is the fact that they don't push the envelope anymore. They phrase it in different ways, and usually one of the most common critics is complaining that it's the same damn game they keep releasing over and over, which I actually disagree with, but I get the intent. The idea being that a lot of the older Mario games, one of the things they were most known for, and Mario 3 pretty much set the benchmark on this, was really pushing the envelope, really trying to do more stuff. Not just with the hardware, but new concepts, new level design ideas, new fun with regards to how they presented the game. The actual presentation of the game was something they were really working on. And it's really on display in this game, and so far I'm actually finding myself more impressed than I actually thought I'd be. And even I can't deny that, even though I enjoy several of the new Mario games, yes, I even like New Super Luigi Bros. U. I haven't actually played New Mario Brothers U, so there's that. I really do have to admit that most of the older Mario games really push the envelope more. And that brings up an interesting question. Envelope pushing in general, is it the kind of thing that a game should do by default? I know that sounds like a weird question, but like, to use another excellent example of envelope pushing, anybody out there who's seen Mario Brothers, Mario World 2, that is to say Yoshi's Island, know that that game completely shoved the envelope forward, like a frickin' mile. And honestly, that is basically tied for one of my favorite side-scroller games of all time. The point here is you can't really call a game nostalgia, or nostalgia dependent, when it just has more good stuff in it. Just because a game has 8-bit graphics or a retro soundtrack, or is trying to emulate the bygone days, does not make it necessarily a bad or a good game. All games must sit on their own merits. But a lot of the things that the older games did was stuff that we liked, like getting eaten by Big Bertha. Now, it sounds like a joke, but I kind of mean that, because Big Bertha was the representation of something new in the Mario series. The idea that we were large and could die to an enemy in one hit. Even, well, like, okay, see, I'm gonna go and use this explanation, even though I didn't do that on purpose. I died to that guy in one hit because I was small. We understand, on some level or another, when we're playing this from the Mario series, when we're small, we have 1 health. We get hit by an enemy, we die, right? Real simple. We also know, as I mentioned earlier, when we're big, we have more health. The idea that an enemy could kill us in one shot while we're big was actually a new concept. And I know that sounds funny, or like a joke, but I mean that. It was something that was new to this series. I mean, yes, we could fall down a pit, or we could hit lava, or insta-death spikes, or whatever, but an enemy? No. So a lot of players, myself included, got really wowed and psyched out, and oh my gosh, by the Big Bertha, because she could just plain old one-shot you. Now, I do have one other complaint about Mario Bros. 3, and I knew about this already, and this is a great time to talk about it, because I'm going to go ahead and get myself some lives really quick here. Why a live system? Now, the statement could be made very clearly and honestly that a live system is a holdover from the arcade era. I can't believe I just did that. The idea being that, you know, every life represents a quarter, and therefore having a live system at all is representative of you being able to make money off of your game. And admittedly, the Mario's game series, and indeed most game developers in this era, started working on things like arcade games. Even by early on, but especially by this point, the question must be asked, why still do that, you know? There we go. Got it. We're good now. So, the question does need to be asked, why bother with a live system? What's the point? It doesn't actually serve any purpose, right? It's kind of an antiquated concept, and indeed, it's also worth noting that many more modern games also have a live system, which begs the question, why? We'll talk about this a little bit more when this music stops, so you guys don't have to listen to me talking over this. So now that we have our lives, there is actually a question to be asked here. Another reason for the lives system, other than the hold on from the arcade era, and that is punishing failure. Believe it or not, it's one of the hardest decisions to make as a game designer. Because here's the thing, there is such a fine line between punishing too hard and not punishing enough. In any given game, you want there to be some kind of penalty for failing. Otherwise, the game has no urgency, and the player feels no impetus to actually try. They just kind of face mulch until they do it. Now, you can still have a game like that, where there is no penalty for failure and still have it be fun, and it has been done. But punishing failure is something that most, indeed, I would say the vast majority of video games do. Whether it's you die, or you have to reload a level, or you have to lose some of the sand, you know, whatever. There's something you have to take as a punishment for having failed on this level, or this stage, or whatever. Now the thing is, though, and I'm sure this isn't even a hard concept for most of you guys, if you get punished too hard, that has the opposite effect. Except, or rather the same effect, just as bad in the opposite direction. So you get that pause button instead. You get it so that you don't want to play the game because it's just frustrating the crap out of you. You're just irritated now. You're no longer enjoying the gameplay. You follow? So finding that balance between something that is punishing, but not too punishing, is a lot harder to do than it sounds. Now, the Mario franchise has been married to the idea of the live system for a really long time. One might argue a little bit too long. And indeed, many people think that the Mario system should evolve to the point where they no longer have the live system. And I am admittedly one of those people. But it is worth noting that there is a reason the live system exists, and it's to basically give you an arbitrary method of... Okay, it's actually two arbitrary things. One is arbitrary punishment of failure, as I just mentioned. In other words, you failed this level, so you have to go back and either start off at the midpoint ring, if it's a game that has that, or you have to go all the way back to the beginning level, like say with this game, Mario 3, the one I'm talking about right now. Now you might be pointing out the obvious there, well why then have lives, why not just have you go back? Well that's the other arbitrary thing. Hello Wendy. This is actually one of the harder of the Koopaling boxes, in my opinion. Because if you let her, she will get those rings all over the place, and then she'll kill you. And then she can go all over the place, so if you didn't unlock everything, hunting her down can be a real pain. Of course, I unlocked everything, so we're fine. And she's right here. And you could even use the anchor, which is the most useless power-up ever, to make the airship not run. Anyways, getting back to my point. It's arbitrary in the same sense that coins are arbitrary. It's points. And if that doesn't explain it, I'll try to explain a little bit better. But the idea here is points are basically just fluff. They're there to make you go like, aha, I have a high score or whatever. They are there for no other reason than a scorecard of your enjoyment of the game. I can't do this to that, whatever. They are there as a measure which doesn't actually mean anything, indicating you have done this far or accomplished this much or what have you. it's the exact same thing with lives. They are literally just another aspect of score. In fact, actually, if you're paying attention at the bottom of the screen there, you may notice Mario Bros. 3 has a score thing. Several Mario games have a score thing. And again, score is completely arbitrary. It doesn't actually mean anything. It's just your score. Ah, god dang it, she got me again with that. So score, coins, lives, it's all the same basic concept, and it all means pretty much the same amount. Now we're gonna go and try something super hard here, so wish me luck. Got her. Holy crap, that was tense. I love how the Frog Mario holds the wand, by the way, because, you know, he doesn't have any normal sprites. So some of you may be wondering why I bother with all that. Most of you probably already know. Get a little bit of a different message, but also part of the point was to illustrate the 3 special power-ups in Mario Bros. 3. Oh, here's the special message, by the way. Oh me, oh my! You've been transformed! Shall I change you back with this wand? I forget what the other ones are. I know Tanuki is something weird. I like the Hammer Brothers one. No, it's basically, hey, nice digs, you want to share? No dice? What a drag. And don't ask me why I remember the actual terminology on that. So, this is an old strategy I've been using for forever. Just for this level. This is almost the only level I blow star power on. Nope, you're dying. So, one of the interesting things about the game level design in general from this game is it's very indicative of its time. Now, you might be like, well, what do you mean? You know, because it goes left to right, and that's clearly what I mean by that, right? But it's of course not. What I actually mean by that... here's another example of using those sprite things in order to show you where to jump. What I actually mean by that is the idea of tutorializing without tutorials. The overall layout of pretty much all the levels is set up in such that when the enemies and obstacles and platforms and whatnot are rendered on the right side of the screen, they're done so in a way that your eye is drawn to the solution or how you're supposed to deal with it pretty much immediately. Sometimes you may be wrong, of course, but that's the idea. Not the wrong part, the idea part. And I just mention that because in an era now, you know, most tutorials are... well, tutorials. You actually have a tutorial, and it's like, hey, so in this level you should do this, and press this button, and blah 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 blah. Now don't mistake me for trying to bash tutorials. I just think over-tutorialization is a problem. Now, but, you know, this level, the level design of this game and another game I can mention, Mario World specifically, both really heavily speak to the idea of trying to tutorialize without actually having tutorials, just... okay, this is this and that, and it's also kind of indicative because the entire point is to basically guide you and help you out in figuring out how to get through the level. Now, you may say that's for a child thing, although admittedly that changes later on in the game, but, you know, whatever. But the point is that is in complete contrast to one of the other game designing philosophies where they will try to psych you out, basically, subvert your expectations, the so-called Kaizo game design philosophy. Insert Godzilla joke here. Another Godzilla joke here. One of the things I wanted to comment too is the inclusion of the large enemies here, which, aside from being amusing for being, you know, big and ungainly looking, there's also the technical advancement of having actually to make 4-size sprites like that, 4 square sprites. But then they do this, where they have this level, and this is the only level like this. We can actually go back and forth between large and small. Now, of course, those of you who played Mario 64 might recognize this mechanic. Oh, wow, that was actually close. But, I just like it because it adds an aesthetic to it. It adds a flavor to this land that's different from the other ones. You know, they had the first one, which is default, then they had desert, then they had water, then they have this one, then they have sky, which is obvious, and then ice, and then pipe, and finally, you know, dark. All of them have a distinct feel to it. Oh, good, a Tanuki suit. Let's go and talk about one thing I don't like. I mean, it's been long enough, and Lord knows there's plenty about this game I actually don't like, and it's been really kicking me in the teeth as I've been through this playthrough. If you notice my lives count bouncing all over the place over there, you're probably fully aware of that fact. And that is the squiggliness. Now, you're probably looking at me like, what the hell is he talking about? It's a term my friend Gary came up with to describe Luigi, specifically. Oh wow, I could just... okay, whatever. The squiggliness, you see, is best described as... well, hell, there's actually a sound effect. Here. Hear that? That's the squiggly. Now, there's a lot of reasons to have the squiggly in a game. They're all kind of debatable as to whether or not they're a valid reason or not. I've heard some developers argue a lot, actually, as to whether or not the squiggly should be a thing in games. I don't like it personally. I like the ability to have more direct control over my character. That's just my take on it. Maybe it's because of realism. Because, I mean, you would just kind of keep sliding at least a little bit. Although in some games it goes kind of overboard. Well, here we go. Wish me luck. Oh, by the way, I promised I'd show off some of the stuff, so, oh, hang on. I did it wrong. Okay, so you see that flame? Yeah, I can actually kill the flame with statue. You can kill a lot of stuff you're not supposed to. Notice it's not coming out anymore. You can kill a lot of stuff you're not supposed to with the Tanuki suit. You're also kind of invincible while you do it, but it's temporary, see? It goes back pretty quickly. So another funny thing is how the characters have personalities that develop over time, and usually from weird sources. For example, some of you may or may not be aware of a comic book series whose name I don't even know. It's like Mario Adventures or something like that, that came out through Nintendo Power for a period of time there. And, oh shoot, no! There we go. And, it detailed, it was basically like a retelling, a dramatic retelling of Super Mario World. In most of the personality traits that would later become hallmarks of several characters, Luigi, Bowser, the Koopalings, Peach, all actually started there in that comic, because they really liked the characterization. Go figure, right? I didn't make it. So, and it's true because not only that, but a lot of the Mario RPG games then later added a significant amount of characterization, which then became the norm. And so forth and so on. It's just interesting to me to see where it all comes from and why, what sticks and what doesn't. My actual reason for bringing that up is, in fact, Iggy here, who became the brainy one of the Koopalings. And you're gonna love this, because he wore glasses. That's the reason he became the brainy one. It was just something they did to distinguish him from the others, and yeah, Iggy is now the smart one who has his own little, you know, it does all the inventions and that kind of a thing. That was true in the Choose Your Own Adventure books, too. So this is the thing for the Tanuki. I don't even remember what this is, so here it is. Thank you, kind raccoon. Please tell me your name. My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father and wore him on your head! Oh, never mind. Let's talk about one other thing that Mario Bros. 3 got across. That is, it's the first in the series to do this, although certainly not the last. Indeed, I would argue that a lot of the groundwork for what became the Mario RPG series was basically laid right here in Mario 3. The idea here being of Mario being a world, a setting, rather than just a game. The idea here is that the idea of a world, a setting, of people, of lives, of all the different differences of what would eventually become culture and whatnot, all basically started, at least in my completely unprofessional opinion, right here, with Mario 3. So I've actually been dying a lot. You probably can't tell unless you're paying attention and looking at my lives counter, which is bouncing all over the place as I both get and then lose lives. But yeah, I'm dying a lot. Here's an interesting factoid, though. I haven't actually gotten frustrated yet, and I'm not actually sure why. I'm actually trying to determine why that is. And you might be like, well, it's because you have nostalgia goggles, in which case I smack you in the face and you're totally missing the point of this entire endeavor. I think if I had to explain one reason why I'm not so frustrated, it's because of the fact that the game... the recycle time between death and getting back into the gameplay and making your second attempt is quite low, quite quick, all things considered. And I think I'm going to stick my stamp of approval on that statement, because Lord knows, I don't know about you guys, but me personally, when I'm playing a game and you die, and for whatever reason there's just this colossal wait period as you're just like, hang on. And know, maybe it's a big loading screen, maybe you have to go through the whole death animation, maybe you have to do, you know, this or whatever. There's something that is in your way, and you're just like, oh my god, I just want to get back to the freaking game already. Maybe that's, I don't know, but all I do know is that what is in this level is the greatest power-up of all time, especially given the fact that it can actually bug out the game so hard, it would hard crash. Kuribo's shoe is one of those things, though, that most players, myself included, anytime we do this game, we make a point of being like, yeah! Yeah, so that shoe is only in that level. In fact, it is such a rare thing that the only other time it's referenced at all is in Mario and Luigi 3, I want to say it was. Yeah, it was 3. Bowser's Inside Story. We're making our way up through this tower. Obviously some kind of fortress or doom tower or whatever. And as we go further and further up, you know, we keep going through these things. We see these little hanging lamps or whatever they are that we'll, like, never see again. And then we get up here and we can actually see clouds in the background, you know. And for those of you who have, of course, played this game, you already know where this is going. But, for those of you who haven't, when you finally get to the top, you actually exit a pipe, and here we are, up in the sky. I just thought that was cool, especially when I was a kid. I still think it's cool. A neat little gameplay story integration thing. Why are there just waterfalls up here? Ah, whatever. I'm not gonna talk during this stage. Oh god, kill me, the bread. Oh, jeez, really? That's why I'm not gonna talk during this stage. God, that actually hurts my eyes. Okay, so let's go ahead, you know, in the interest of being honest. Oh my god! In the interest of being honest, both positive and negative, this stage hurts my eyes to the point where I'm having a hard time seeing what I'm doing. So far. Whee! Alright, wish me luck. Let's do this again. Oh god, my eyes. Yeah, see, I have, oh my god, I have a partial color blindness on the red spectrum, as it happens. But in addition to that, I just have a hard time figuring out what the hell's going on this stage. Maybe I just suck. That is entirely possible. Holy crap! Now I'm gonna die into that pit right there. In fact, I am now so paranoid about that, we're gonna do that instead. So, one of the other interesting things is several of the airships, not all of them, but several of them, also had themes for them, in addition to the Koopalings having themes. Oh my god, really? And, it also the two kind of dovetailed in several situations, where the theme of one would kind of help to form the theme of the other, especially in later games. But yeah, this ship is basically just nothing but firepower, which kind of suits Roy when you think about it. And then we have Roy. He's a shaker. If you don't know what that means, you probably haven't played a video game. But you can see the screen shaking, that actually is a paralyzing thing. It paralyzes you if he touches the ground when you're on the ground. And generally, especially if you're small, that means you're dead. Traditionally, most players who've played any video game ever, especially a side-scroller, tend to hate this type of place more than any other. The ice physics area. There's the, you know, you've heard the statement about the obligatory water level, or underwater level, or the obligatory sewer level. Neither of which exactly have good reputations. But amongst most gamers, and especially speedrunners, one of the things I've noticed is that one of the more hated things is the ice physics levels, because ice physics just completely destroy everything you've learned about the game up to that point. You know, you've finally gotten your beat, you've finally gotten your pace, you've finally figured out exactly how you're supposed to be moving, when you're supposed to jump, what the angles are going to be, and then you get to this place, and all of that is basically just kind of put on a skew, and it's like, oh, well, now I have to do this. Well, crap. So those of you paying attention may have noticed I've lost a few lives on the last few levels. Pretty much, that's to be expected, but one in particular was really frustrating me. And, you know, I'm not going to deny that, I'm not going to try and dress it up. I was just sucking horribly, but it was a perfect example of something I wanted to talk about in gaming in general, and that is the frustration genome. I'm kidding, that's not what it's called. I have no idea what it's called, and frankly I don't actually care what it's actually called. I don't think anybody actually cares what it's called. The idea here being... The idea here being... You're playing a level normally, and it's especially worse when this happens, because this is what happened to me. You get to pretty much the end of the level, and you're like, aha! I have completed the level! And then you realize that you screwed up your very last jump and you died. I was like, oh, that sucks, but whatever, you know, I'll make do. The idea is, no matter how you look at it, in addition to being frustrated, irritated, and overall just not in your best mindset and not playing at your best, you're also impatient on top of all of that. So, yeah, generally you tend to do really badly, and then you die again. And that's the actual frustration genome. That's where things actually get bad, is when you just die the first time, and then it's like, then you lose your groove, and then you die a second time, then you die a third time, then you die a fourth time, then you die a fifth time, then you die a sixth time. And just over and over and over and over until you are so frustrated and irritated that you basically have to just stall for a second, or just keep pushing. I mean, those are really your options. You say screw it and keep pushing for it, or you give up for a bit, take a break, and then just try to cool your jets a bit. Because you keep dying, and each death makes it worse. Winter is coming. So I have a theory as to why it is this game doesn't frustrate me as much as it should, especially when I'm dying. And it basically has to do with the idea that as you're going through the game, there's a variance, there's like a balance between difficult levels and easier levels. Not easy levels, just easier. And so, when you go through a difficult level, there's usually an easy level or two following it up so that you have some kind of a break. And that's important for a very simple reason, because it makes it feel like you're accomplishing something. You know, you finish the difficult level. Hang on. You finish the difficult level and it's like, and then you actually feel like you're making progress, because then you've not only finished the next level, the much easier level, but then you also finish the levels after that with relative ease, because, you know, you've got that progress thing going. So yeah, you may have been stonewalled at that level that was giving you trouble, even if that level wasn't actually necessarily hard, because you were just having that frustration effect going on. But then you keep going, and you start making progress, and so you tend to forget about that. You know, the negative experience tends to get absorbed in the more positive experience of actually accomplishing something. As you can see, you can not only kill boos with them, you can kill floor boos with them. And, believe it or not, swamps. Oh, hey, it's a seal. Oh, and he's got a little crown. It's terrible. The king is much cuter than he's ever been before. We must save him. Alright, this is gonna be hard, so wish me luck. Just a little tidbit about this ship. This is Lemmy's ship. Now, Lemmy is, you know, the young, happy-go-lucky kind of guy. He's not actually the youngest. I believe that distinction belongs to Larry. Oh, that's right, you can't hit him with these. But a lot of people have assumed a lot of things about Lemmy, his personality, as a result of that. Obviously, he's very childish. You know, he treats things kind of like they're a game. He's just having fun with it. There we go. But kind of the assumption here is that maybe his ship is not devoid of enemies because it's not really a ship of war. It's more like it's his playground. You can interpret whatever you want from that. It's just my take on it. As promised. Hey, you. How about lending me your clothes? No dice? What a drag. Man, I was actually really close with that, wasn't I? And that's all three of them, guys, just for you. I can't believe I actually pulled that off. Now, those of you who watch my stream for any length of time know that I tend to make, you know, basically punish myself for the entertainment of the viewers. Well, I made a promise when I was going to go through this game, and I'm going to go ahead and show this unedited, nothing else. You're going to see exactly what's going to happen in this level. This is actually my least favorite level in the entire game. I'm not actually kidding. There is another level that is up there, but this is the worst. This is a side auto-scroller underwater level. And if you don't have the frog suit, which I've gone out of my way to not have, even though I just got one, well, you'll see. But yeah, so since I have to talk this whole time, because I'm showing this unedited, you know, occasionally I just pause to catch my breath or whatever. Damn it to hell. Let's go ahead and talk about why this level sucks. First of all, water physics are one of those situations where every time you hit a certain variable is added to your momentum. That variable is direction, and amount depends entirely on about 3 other variables as you're going. And you're probably already seeing why I hate this level. And now you're seeing why I hate it again. You know, I can just picture some people saying, well, this level's easy. I know some speedrunners who hate this level, that's all I'm gonna say about that. Those guys are way better at this game. Ah, damn it! I was really hoping to have a deathless run of this. Wow, I like how it's treated over there as a separate area. Okay, like I said, unedited. Well, you've seen Death 1. Now we gotta go through it again. That's what happens when you die. And I just lost, like, the only power-up, so... if I get tapped, you're gonna see Death 2. How many of you out there would like to see Death 2? Raise your hands! Wait, why are you all raising your hands? You guys are bastards! Oh my god. Yeah, by the way, if you get too far off screen, it's a Death 2. That's kinda always true with auto-scrollers like this. Oh god. He's got me in a really bad position. Yeah, there was, like... if I could have gone straight right, but he might have gotten me there, too. Okay, well, I think that's enough, right, guys? Right? I think so, too. Let's show off what this level's like with the frog suit. Because I never got to show off the frog suit earlier. So this is the frog suit on land. You saw this earlier when I was doing the airship. This is the frog suit in the water. Total control. It's fast, too. I'm not even hitting B, where I can go even faster. Now, I am going to try not to be arrogant. Because I could just be like, whee! And swim circles around everything. But no, we're going to be careful. And we're going to try and actually get through this, for reals. Are we going to get hit by the Big Bertha? And then we're going to lose everything. And then we're going to get hit by the squid blooper mother. Bloopers, those are called bloopers. Rather appropriate, given the immediate circumstances. Alright, so now that we have wasted our frog suit, here we are in the minefield of death. I hate blooper nannies, by the way. That's those guys, the ones that shoot off the little ones. Part of the reason I hate them is those little guys actually have a larger hitbox than they look like, and part of the reason is because their trajectory is not static. I think it's probably the easiest way I can express that. Please come down to the right, thank you! No, no, quick, go get it! Oh god, super lag. I don't think I'm gonna get it. Oh, thank god. So, okay, here's an interesting question. What causes lag on the NES? I've actually had that question before. The answer is literally, kind of what you would imagine. The NES has a certain number of a certain allotment in its memory for how many active objects it can have loaded at a given time. Now, the background doesn't actually count for that, believe it or not. The background is loaded kind of separately. Again, the card analogy is pretty close to explaining what that is. But how many sprites it can have active. Sprites are treated completely differently in the way that the NES handles. Alright guys, let's go ahead and get a letter from the princess. I mean, we've been getting these letters for 7 worlds now, so what do we got? What's up, princess? Oh my god. Total spoilers. One of the emphases they were trying to do here is to just have constant firepower everywhere. Not only to, you know, emphasize that the Koopa Kingdom, or the Koopa Empire, or the Koopa Troop, or whatever you want to call it, had access to plenty of firepower, but it's also actually, I shouldn't even say it is a primarily stage design thing. The idea is to basically psych you out. There's just stuff shooting everywhere, and dodging it all does get a little harrowing, especially if you don't know what you're doing or where you're going. Now, those of you may or may not aware of this. This has been a thing for a long time amongst Mario 3 players. Speedrunners, challenge runners, doesn't matter. For the sake of challenge, I'm only making one shot at this. I'm not really... I'm going to do my best, but... we're going to try to do the hardest stage in the... oh, I'm sorry, the second hardest stage in the entire game, and arguably one of the most hated stages in the entire game, as Frog Mario. Wish me luck. I'm so not going to do this. Whew. So... you may be asking, why is this hard? Well, first of all the platforms are short. Second of all, they are moving quickly. Now, it doesn't seem like a huge disparity in speed, but let me just say that if you're not paying attention, it's really easy to get stuck in a way where you cannot recover. You have to constantly be on the move. No! Damn it! I made it past the halfway point, guys. I tried. Ah! Oh god, I made it. Oh my god, now I'm gonna die to the boss. What do you want to bet? Well, mini-boss. No! Oh, thank god. Jeez Louise. Well, I was gonna P-wing my way through this, but as you can see, that didn't work out that way. Left. Left! Lots of love for the aesthetic, though. They're really trying to get across this Darkland feel in the style of the level, in addition to the way that the whole overworld map works up to this point. The black on black on black, only separated by white, really gets across the point, I think, and does a good job of making this feel different than all the other levels thus far, even though it's literally just a palette swap. So, props for that. Something just occurred to me, guys. It just occurred to me why I have more time. Oh god, the quicksands got me now! It just occurred to me why I usually have a harder time with Worlds 6 and 7 and 5, for that matter, than I do 8. Back when I was a kid, and when I would play this game way too much, the tendency of what I would do is I would use the 2 warp whistle trick, where you warp once and then you warp on the warp level. And then when you do that, you end up straight in World 8. And so as a result, I kind of did World 8 more than I did those other worlds, because I only did those other worlds when I was doing a full playthrough. You know what I mean? So I like to call this the Up and Down Fortress. It's actually really cool. In fact, I recommend you go look at a map of it or something right now. Because, here's the thing, this is the up area, right? It's all cold and dark and all that fun stuff. You go to the down area and it's like this. It's all hot. It looks like it's the understructure of the fortress kind of a thing. Just this cool aesthetic feel going on. You can pretty much traverse the fortress on either side, depending on what your setup is. For example, I can go through the down, because I have a tail. One of the other interesting things I think about this game is that they try to go... They have Boom Boom, and he only has 3 modes. Normal, where you hit him 3 times. Flying, where he grows wing in his second phase. Or Jumper, where he goes super high into the air during his third phase. But they go, throughout the levels, if you're paying attention, they do a lot of things pretty much entirely with the terrain, in order to try and make the fight more interesting than just, you know, oh well, here he is again. I want to take a brief moment to point out that Castle Koopa, or Castle of Koopa, or Bowser's Castle, whatever the hell you want to call it, has actually had several different iterations throughout the years, but this is actually the very first showing of it right here. This is the NES version of Mario 3, and it looks like a big, weird, ugly face thing with mushrooms and a really big courtyard that also happens to have a giant tank platoon in it, so... personally, I like what they did with it, Mario World and the Mario RPG series, but that's just me. Most notably, Super Mario RPG. I think one thing that is a little disappointing about this is the general lack of a last dungeon song. I mean, there's a last boss song, but no last dungeon song. By the way, this is a nice haulback. You know, the whole corridor with the fireballs coming at you. Straight out of Mario Bros. 1. Good stuff there. Alright, this is it. Big climactic showdown. Tiny Mario versus Giganto Bowser. Bring it on! I'm ready. I'm ready. Yeah. I'm gonna bounce on your head until something happens. That's usually what happens. Hey, Bowser. So, this is really funny. Yeah, so his collision box is actually his upper body, not his lower. Now, obviously, he'll still hurt you if he stands on you, but yeah, you can just be like, hey, Bowser. He can actually also still hurt you if he shoots a fireball pretty much straight down. Like a down angle and then in your direction, kind of a thing. So, here's another question. How many of you, when you were playing this fight, used to make a game out of it, trying to go ahead and have as much of the terrain broken as possible by the time you beat it? And you can't see it, but my hand is in fact raised. No! Bowser. Obviously, the question that is now presented is, what do I think of it now? Hence part of the title. What is it that I view of this game? Do I still enjoy it? Do I not enjoy it? Blah, blah, blah. Yes, I did still enjoy this game without question, without hesitation. There were a lot of things that, as I was going through, I found myself appreciating more than I remember doing so when I was younger. Mostly the quote-unquote more boring things, technical achievements and level design and aspects of the overall game design that really just kind of shined for me, and I really found myself enjoying more than I remember. In addition to that, though, there were several things that I enjoyed less than before. In fact, there were a fair few things that I enjoyed less than before, mostly with regards to certain levels of frustration and the whole frustration seesaw effect, which I described earlier, that sort of thing. However, at the end of the day, as I've said many times, every game is flawed. This one is no exception, and I still enjoyed this game despite its flaws, because there is enough good on display to overwhelm those. So, bottom line, let's go ahead and put this out here right up front. Yes, I still think this is one of the greatest games ever made, still in the top 100, so yes, this still deserves a stamp of quality. And in addition, obviously, because as I just showed you, this does deserve one addendum stamp on top of that, and that is the stamp of Save the Princess, because I did in fact complete the game. No other stamps awarded, I didn't have to look anything up, didn't find anything particularly frustrating, so that's just my take on it. Hope you've enjoyed, and I'll see you at the next game.